Hey, how's it going, universe? Shaun here from Zoobox, and today we're going to be talking about David Cronenberg's 2005 film, A History of Violence, directed by David Cronenberg, written by Josh Olson, based on a graphic novel of the same name by John Wagner and Vince Locke. The film, who does it star? It stars Viggo Mortensen, Maria Bello, Ed Harris, William Hurt, Ashton Holmes, Peter McNeil, Stephen McHattie, Greg Burke, Kyle Schmid, Sumela Kay, and others. The plot synopsis is a mild-mannered man becomes a local hero through an act of violence which sets off repercussions that will shake his family to its very core in this action thriller. Yeah, so this is an interesting movie. I actually saw this in the theater back in 2005. I went with a film nerd buddy. I was living in Boston at the time, got to see it on a nice big Boston screen, and I remember the movie being kind of divisive. Like, people didn't kind of understand the wavelength it was working on. Cronenberg's an interesting director. He's kind of one of these guys who's more about kind of the philosophical conversation, but this movie kind of presents itself as more of populist entertainment. It's kind of a melodrama, a saccharine, almost corny melodrama for a lot of it. And I think that is what a lot of people have a problem with, but I think people kind of miss the point in the sense that he's doing that to juxtapose the intense moments of brutality and violence and how the domino effect of violence, kind of the cause and effect nature. If you do something violent or if you hurt a person, that has ripple effects which you'll never really be able to truly account for. The way that it can infect a person's life. It's kind of like when you tell a lie, right? You tell a little lie and then have to tell a million more to hide that lie, or that lie gets spread around to other people and it takes on a life of its own before it gets back to you. That's kind of the same kind of concept here that the characters are dealing with. I've always been a big fan of this movie, and today I was watching it and I was surprised how well it holds up. And I think you have to have, though, in all honesty, I do think you have to be kind of keyed into what Cronenberg is trying to achieve, because there is something, I don't know, like cliche ridden about it, over idealistic. There's a sense of, it reminds me a little bit of Blue Velvet in the way that it kind of posits this idea of the idyllic American, or just the idyllic kind of family life and small towns and the simple nature of all that. But all of that stuff always has a deep, dark, seedy underbelly to it. There's this kind of subculture that runs beneath what you see on top. The movie addresses some of that a little bit, but it's mostly trying to kind of impart to you this concept of historical violence and past trauma, and those traumas kind of that you bring to other people's lives and how that can spiral out. Specifically here, it deals with the family unit. It deals with by all accounts, a really good man, a principled man who has a family that is kind of a staple of the small town. Everybody loves him. He works in the small diner. He's completely he's the perfect townie. He's the perfect guy in all by all accounts, right? When we think about kind of an idealistic monolith of what it means to be like a middle American man, right? And he's got this dark past that's finally caught up with him after years and years of him being able to kind of hide from it and get away from it. It's caught up with him because he has to use his ability to inflict violence and pain, something that he kind of learned to do as a young man in his past life, to protect the people that he loves, or the people that these victims. And it's just interesting. It's an interesting conversation that the movie has about kind of being able to move past mistakes, about trauma, about identity. Who are you? Are you just your history, or does it matter kind of the choices you make as you move along? It's something kind of prescient in the modern age, right? Because we live in the internet era. People are being canceled left and right for things that happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. People digging up old internet posts and whatnot, and then holding you to account as if life is static. That's kind of it's a good parallel to A History of Violence, what the character is going through. and that's kind of the general sense of the movie. But some of the things I really loved about the movie, though, like I said, I think Cronenberg, one of my favorite directors of all time. He does a great job of kind of subverting your expectations and presenting you something that needs to be seen as a whole, because it could be seen as too saccharine, too cheesy, too cliched, too melodramatic. There's some painful line reads in this movie, specifically from Ashton Holmes, who plays the son, plays Viggo Mortensen's son. He's kind of bad, but in a way that gives you the sense of the kind of the after school special that I felt like was actually really worked in context to the kind of totality of the movie. And and everybody is kind of keyed in that way. And except for some of the standout characters, mostly the men of violence, the bad guys. The movie starts with Stephen McHattie, good Canadian boy, one of my favorite character actors, Stephen McHattie. Just actually as a side tangent, if you've never seen the movie Pontypool, it's a great kind of chamber piece horror movie, zombie movie from Canada, from I think like 2008 or something like that. Check out Pontypool. He's a terrific actor that kind of gets underutilized, but whenever he shows up, it's super special. Him and actor Greg Burke, they kind of open the movie as these murderous drifters that they're just completely primal, completely animalistic. They just take whatever they want, regardless of the circumstances. And they are fucking awesome in this movie. I mean, they're all in it for a brief period of time, like the first 15 or 20 minutes of the movie, but they are phenomenal. Stephen McHattie, like I said, one of my all-time favorites. But the Greg Burke guy is actually, or Brick, is that how you pronounce his name? Brick, Bryk. Okay, they're fancy pants. Whoa. He's really kind of intimidating and creepy in like more of a real way, like a more of a serial killer way, where Stephen McHattie feels a little bit more performative, but he has such a fucking great line when he goes into Viggo Mortensen's cafe or little restaurant and it's closing, and they're like, "Sorry, sir, we're not serving anymore." And he said, "I said coffee," and he just like fucking, just a great line delivery. It's so awesome. And, and it's got all like the little Cronenberg touches with like kind of the over the top violence, which is also again used to kind of juxtapose the idyllic nature of the town and the people of the town. And he just kind of wants you to see like really what does violence really look like? What does it look like when you fucking like flat palm a dude's nose into his brain? Like he wants you to see that, because the movie is largely about consequence. It's about consequence, like I said, cause and effect. And he wants to kind of juxtapose the two things, like this idea of this fantasy we have about life and about the things that we do. Because you could extrapolate this concept of violence and the nature of violence and how that spreads out like a virus and whatnot. You could say that about anything, like I said, about telling a lie. How that can just get into your life, kind of negative attitudes or being unprincipled, not being righteous, whatever you want to call it. Not living to your principles, not living to your virtues, or the things you find virtuous, right? And it's got all that stuff seated in there, and even, like I said, is reflected in the gore. Like it's there for a purpose. It's not just gratuitous. It's not there for kind of shallow titillation, right? It's not there for the gore hounds. It actually has a purpose, and it makes a point. It makes a point about these kind of things, right? Other great actors, I mean, Ed Harris is great. Probably the secret MVP of the movie is Ed Harris. He gives this great performance of Carl Fogarty, this kind of made man that Viggo Mortensen's character had wronged in a earlier part of his life, and they find him because of this news story, because he becomes a local hero. He saves a bunch of people in the cafe, and then they start coming and looking for him, and it's a really great movie. So it's honestly a movie I would love to deep dive with somebody someday and just really get into it, because there's so many different things going on. There's so many things you can parse out and pick apart in a history of violence that I kind of honestly wish I had prepared myself a little bit more to talk about it, because it's something that I do think requires some notes and some actual, maybe some more than just stream of consciousness style like I do with these daily videos. But I watched it today. needed to make a video. So there you have it. I actually did read the source material. I read the graphic novel, A History of Violence, and the movie actually represents it pretty well, although it does leave the door open for it has a different tone. The graphic novel is much more melodramatic, much more kind of straightforward. Like his family accepts the fact that he's a different person than he was when he was younger, like pretty much right off the bat, and they're completely supportive, 100%. This movie deals with like kind of the darker nature of that, and the reason why they go into that in the movie is to kind of have this identity crisis. The family kind of has an identity crisis, and how they deal with their problems and everything. Kind of when you upend the foundation of something. When your name isn't even real, like their last name is Stahl, but that's not even a real name. That's not his name. So it deals with that and like shows kind of the son who kind of gets bullied, maybe lashing out because now that he's aware that there is this history of violence in his family and his father, he feels like maybe this is a way to solve his problems, right? And then he has to actually engage in an incredibly violent act to save his father at some point in the movie. And that's, it's about just this idea, like I said, that you can't get away from that stuff. It's going to have a domino effect on the rest of your life. And it's kind of a simplistic way of communicating that message, but Cronenberg is really good. He layers in a lot of stuff. He's working on a lot of different levels. So it's interesting sometimes when I hear people kind of, I think, unfairly dismiss A History of Violence as like a corny movie. Like they just don't get it. Or all they talk about is the brutality of it. Which is weird to me because it's not like a hard movie to get. It's not a hard movie to understand. Viggo Mortensen is great. Maria Bello is great too. Like she used to be, especially at this time of her career and a little bit before this, she was in tons of stuff. Tons and tons of stuff. I don't really know what she does so much nowadays, but she's a great actress. This movie reminded me of that. Viggo Mortensen, also a great actor. He gives an incredibly subtle, nuanced performance as he's like kind of having an identity crisis and shifting between Joey and Tom, the person that he is today, and he kind of slips back into his old life a little bit, and he communicates that through just subtle body language and the way he'll hold himself. So it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting performance, and I think it's often overlooked, to be honest with you, if you were to look at the oeuvre of Viggo Mortensen. I mean, I know we all like Strider. We all talk about Lord of the Rings because he's fucking great in Lord of the Rings. For the perfect Strider, maybe. But he's really great here, and he makes everything feel like it coherent and cohesive, in his performance. The way he just has this great through line of just struggle and not really knowing what to do and not knowing if he has to confront it or if he should confront it or whatever. It's a great movie. It's a great movie. Check out A History of Violence if you've never seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a long time, like for me, totally worth a revisit. Very interesting movie. Very grown up in a weird way. I think you might enjoy it. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about Zoobox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. Also, if you'd like to make a recommendation for these daily videos, leave it in the comments and I'll put it on the list. All right, everybody. Have a great one.